Hello, our viewers out there. You're welcome to yet another exciting episode of Climate Connect Nigeria. I'm your host for today, Mr. Teso Safa. I'm a climate change enthusiast who is passionate about raising awareness about pressing issues regarding climate change in sub-Saharan Africa, particularly northeastern Nigeria. And today with me on this podcast is Mr. Ted Afaga, the programs manager of DCR Ambassadors and a fellow of Institute of Climate Smart Research and Policy Advocacy. Today on this podcast, we'll be talking about climate smart agriculture, its intricacies, and the essential knowledge our viewers out there need to know about what climate smart agriculture is all about. But before we delve right into it, Mr. Ted, I'd like yours to know what Institute of Climate Smart Research and Policy Advocacy is all about.
Okay, good day viewers out there. The Institute of Climate Smart and Research and Policy Advocacy is an institute that just came on board recently, and it's carrying out its mandate of providing world-class knowledge on climate change, its impact, how to mitigate climate change, and the necessary knowledge that people need to be equipped with in order to cope with climate change impact in our society. The Institute is also involved in advocacy. It advocates on key issues such as climate justice, and then environmental fairness and equity and integrity. So these are part of the issues that the Institute deals with. Currently, as we speak, the Institute is currently carrying out some courses on climate change that the general public can register and carry on those courses.
Okay, that's very interesting.
The good thing is that these classes are held online. So your proximity within the institute doesn't really matter.
Okay.
You can be anywhere on the globe and still join these classes.
Okay.
We'll be sending a link in this video for people to click in.
Okay, that's fine.
Register and carry on those courses.
Okay, that's very interesting. So our viewers out there, you've just heard from the fellow of Institute of Climate Smart Research and Policy Advocacy. So let's delve right into our topic of discussion today about climate smart agriculture. So can you tell our viewers out there what climate smart agriculture is? Maybe give us a definition of what it is.
Okay. Well, when we talk about climate smart agriculture, just like we use our cell phones and they are smart. They are smart in the sense that they are able to understand the mood, the changes within us, and they can do varieties of things, right? For instance, when you go out in the sun, if your smartphone is on a particular setting that when you're in the sun, it gets brighter, and then when you get to places that are dim or places that have low light, it also adjusts. So now, since we've been battling with the issues of climate change, what comes to mind is smart agriculture.
Okay.
Smart in the sense that we need to reevaluate our farming methods, our farming techniques, and all of that. So the aim of climate smart agriculture is for us to have an increase in food productivity, increase in the overall agricultural output, livestock, crops, and what have you. So climate smart agriculture is a way of, coping with a way of utilizing the scarce resources that we have in the best smart and using technological approaches in order to get the best out of our environment.
Oh, that's interesting. That's interesting. So thank you, Mr. Ted, for that impressive answer. And I believe you've already talked about how it contributes to sustainable food production in a changing climate, right? So I would like to know, how can farmers, especially small-scale farmers, adopt climate-smart practices in regions most vulnerable to climate change? Like as we are dealing with issues of desert encroachment here in the northeast of Nigeria, how can these small-scale farmers be able to adopt some of the best practices that you highlighted earlier?
Yes, for these issues you've mentioned, farmers can look at techniques that are cost-effective on them, that are not very won't tell on their pockets. Because we understand the financial situations. There's inflation, there are things that are really taking up what the farmer should use. So now what small farm holders can do is that they can come together and adopt strategies,
Okay.
or they can adopt certain skills that will minimize the use of their effort and then maximize their output.
Okay.
What am I talking about here?
Okay.
You know, when we talk about smart agriculture, you see that the rainfall pattern is reducing, right? And then it tells us that we will need to conserve water.
Okay.
Since we're seeing there's desert encroachment, there is drought, there is low rainfall,
Okay.
that means that for us to be smart about these issues, whenever we have fresh water or whenever we have rainwater or our water bodies, we need to conserve them in a way that it will serve us better.
Okay.
So here we're talking about irrigation farming. We're talking about targeted irrigation, whereby you don't just spray water across the farmland like that, but you target where this water will mostly be utilized by that crop.
Okay.
And then you have some species of crops or plants that are drought resistant.
Okay.
If you're in a region where there's drought encroachment, there are also modified seedlings of crops these days that they take a shorter span of time to mature.
Okay.
Yes. So instead of having a particular seedling that will take you 5-6 months before they produce, there are improved varieties that, since we know that the nature of the rainfall is reducing because of our changing climate, there are seedlings that do well to produce within 3 to 4 months.
Okay.
There are rice species now that do well. They do, like, they come to maturity in less than 100 days time. You can harvest those species. So farmers can adopt these kind of techniques also, using species that are drought resistant, using species that don't take longer periods of time before harvest time. You can adapt that. And then we also have practices where, instead of using fertilizers, you can use compost manure. These are practices that
the local farmers can adopt. The materials are readily available for them. If they are rearing animals, they can easily get them from their farm.
Where you have combined farming, where some of the droppings from your livestock can be used to augment on your farm in terms of manure. So you don't need to go buying NPK fertilizers and the rest, which are expensive. And then you have things like mulching. You know, now that the heat is much, in those days, these were practices that ancestors survived on. You know, you provide mulching.
So are you trying to say our ancestors in the time past also practiced some form of smart agriculture?
Yes, they did. We might see those practices as archaic, but however, with recent researches, we need to go back to those practices. Because now, one of the aim of smart agriculture is that.
So it's not limited to just deploying technology alone. There are other crude methods that can be used as well.
Locally indigenous methods.
Yes, that's interesting.
So, and one of the aim of smart agriculture is that it aims to reduce the effects of greenhouse or the emission of these gases in our atmosphere. Right? So if you're using, instead of using NPKs that are made from the factories, and then you're using animal dung, you know that you're eliminating that long process where factories run
the chemicals and all of that
on diesel or fossil fuel because they use power supply. But your cow, your poultry, they don't need power supply to produce their droppings.
That's true.
So these techniques can also be used. Yes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ted, for that impressive answer. So, but now let's look at how can the government play a role in kind of scaling up climate smart agriculture in developing countries?
Well, the government has a very big role to play. For instance, there's what we call hydroponics. You know, there is these are advanced methods of smart agriculture where crops are being planted on water bodies. You don't actually need earth, like you don't need the ground, you don't need the soil for them to thrive. There are systems that enable plants to grow even on the water. You know this plant they call water hyacinth. You know, it grows on the surface of water. Yes. So now there are techniques that utilizes that kind of approach that the water hyacinth uses, whereby you don't need soil.
Okay.
Right? Crops can be
Able to grow on
water.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's
So,
interesting.
and some of these smart agricultural practices or those procedures, for our local farmers here, they are being leveraged on technology.
Okay.
And you see that some of these technologies are expensive. For
Okay.
instance, if you're going to cultivate crops in a greenhouse, in a farm that, in a greenhouse farm, you see that it requires you to monitor the level of heat in that space.
Okay.
So that crops have added the humidity is being stabilized.
Okay.
So, but if you tell our farmers that are not technologically inclined to go into some of these kind of farming techniques, it will cost them a lot. You need to do some form of retraining. They will need to work with experts that will help them through. So this is the area where government can come in.
Okay.
I think it's also a wake-up call for government to revive extension workers.
Okay. That's interesting.
Yes. In the past, we had extension workers that will go around telling our farmers
and educating them on the best farm practices.
Very well. But in recent times, we don't feel them. I don't know whether they are still active or not. But for us to practice smart agriculture, we need to know those people who guide our farmers towards implementing these smart agricultural practices.
Yeah.
So I feel government can support in that aspect of bringing in extension workers that are knowledgeable. They are equipped with the desired tools, the necessary tools to help with our local farmers to boost our food production.
Okay.
Yes. And then government can also give incentives to farmers.
Okay.
Because government can't deal with individuals. Farmers needs to come with we need to have clusters of farmers. Like we need to have farming communities so that government can identify with them and work with them, like in providing some tools or educating them on certain farming practices. It won't be done on an individual level. It will have to be done in clusters for effective dissemination of those kind of information. So another thing government can do is to bring together small and large-scale farmers. Yes, where they will be able to take stock of what farmers need to boost food production in our nation using smart agricultural practices.
Wow.
Yes, practices that ensure that there's more efficiency. Like recently, people are beginning to delve into the dry season farming. And dry season farming don't just work if you don't put in the necessary things in order.
It's true.
Like your irrigating equipment, you need to find water sources.
And sometimes the irrigating equipment can be costly.
And then the irrigation too, it has techniques that you use in irrigating that will conserve water.
So, but you're already telling us all of this. So let me just ask you, what are the challenges in implementing climate smart agriculture, and how can these challenges be overcome? So, because that's where I see you tilting towards. So I want you to talk about that.
Okay. Now, some of the challenges is that knowledge is not widely accepted by local farmers, or should I say there's inadequacy of these farming techniques. For instance, even crop rotation, where you rotate your crops, you don't extensively farm on a particular soil for long and drain it of its nutrients. When we mean smart, evolving, changing things that will give you better results using minimal little effort. So I think one of the challenges that there's improper knowledge about smart agriculture. Farmers are not fully aware of some of these techniques and how to go about them. And then you'll see that the way our farmers use the land, sometimes there's overusing. Same thing with people who rear cattle. You see, when you overgraze on a particular place, you are not being smart about it. When you overgraze, you see that you are exposing the soil. You need to allow land to heal. You need to allow the soil to regenerate before you go in again. But when you continuously keep using a particular place, farming one crop year in, year out, before you know it, you exhaust the nutrients that are there. And then sometimes wrongful use of fertilizers. Everything has a way you use in moderation, and then you get a better result for it. So these are part of the challenges. And another one is getting the right tools. Like when you look at something like hydroponics,
Yeah.
you know that it's purely a technological approach to farming.
Okay.
You know, a native farmer without proper knowledge of that won't be able to go into it.
Okay.
And nowadays we have the use of drones. Drones can be used to water a large farmland,
Okay.
hectares.
And even can be deployed for harvesting,
For
planting,
harvesting,
and a whole lot
yes.
of practices on the
Yes,
farm.
and those tools. You know, part of the challenge is that sometimes farmers don't have access to some of this equipment. Like we have modern tractors, that modern harvesters, planters, and all those things.
They are self-driven even. You don't even need a
Some
driver.
are self-driven.
Yeah.
You know, technology has advanced to that level where you might not necessarily man these machines, but they are controlled remotely.
Yeah.
You know, so this form
Which will increase more output and reduce the cost of manual labor and all of those things.
And now we have technology, we have softwares that can even monitor the growth of crops.
Okay.
Yes.
That's interesting.
It tells you that some crops do well in certain parts of the day. So these are when you should plant. This is the season when you should do it, you know. So technology has really gone far to improve our farming, which is making everything smart.
Okay, that's interesting. So our viewers out there, this is a very broad and interesting topic to talk about, but we've come to the end of this podcast today. So we look forward to having you join us on our next episode, where maybe we can be talking further about this smart agriculture. Thank you, Mr. Ted, for coming on our show today.
It's my pleasure being on this podcast. Thank you, viewers out there.
All right. Thank you very much once again for joining us. Bye for now.